right, so good morning. Well, good afternoon, I guess. It's almost noon. Not quite. It is Saturday, March 9th, I think, without checking my phone to confirm that. Pretty sure it's the 9th. I'm a little too far to the right. I don't want to pull my mirror off on the garage door back here. It's always better not to rip the mirrors off your truck when you're backing out of a garage. You know? Call me silly. But it's already, I guess we're kind of getting close to official spring because tonight is the night that we set our clocks ahead 1 hour, and then we'll shift the clock a little bit so that our daylight extends more into the evening, which is my favorite way for it to be. I wish we would just stay on daylight savings time, but everybody's got differing opinions on that. For some reason my camera's doing something weird here. I'm not sure why it's doing this. It's a little bizarre. I've never seen this before. It's like it thinks it's upside down or something. So I'm going to reset it just to see. Okay. I don't know why it's doing what it's doing. I guess it's okay. I don't know. You just have to run with it and see. It's like my image is upside down over here. It's usually not. It's usually right side up. So for some reason my camera's not reading that the view screen is turned toward me. These cameras do weird things randomly. So go figure. It's nothing I've done because I haven't changed any settings on them at all. I have no idea. It's weird. Weirdness. I do want to make a little adjustment here. I'm debating where to go today. I may run up to Chickasha. Maybe. Little chicken's out here scratching around under that tree. Chicks. Chicks. Get this gate open. So maybe I will. Maybe I'll take a little trip up to Chickasha and back. It might be about the right length of a trip for today. So if you'll notice, my vacuum air pump is not doing the same thing it was doing the other day. And Bill kind of schooled me on this. The reason it was doing what it was doing was because of the setting I had on my dashboard. The only thing the vacuum air pump runs on this truck anymore is the air conditioning. So if I don't have my knob clicked in, it'll do that. If the knob's all the way over, it won't do that. Go figure. It's wonderful technology. I guess I ought to go check the mail. It's about time for that. I'll be right back. Okay, let me get back out of the road a little bit. Kind of cold out today. just enough. There we go, that's much better. I was gonna say I have just barely enough leg room. And I didn't remember this cab being that tight. Well, it's because I had my seat scooted forward a little bit. It's got better leg room than I was giving it credit for having. Considerably better. Now my camera's readjusted. It's looking right now. Go figure. All right. So now that I understand, again, I guess I knew this before, but it had been so long since I drove this truck, I had forgotten about that running the air conditioner. For some reason I kept saying it was running the brakes. It does not run the brakes. This truck has independent brakes from that deal, from that component, the vacuum air pump. So I was full of beans. Sorry about that. Now I think I'll just take back roads all the way up. Might as well. Why not? But I'm going to pick up a little speed, because if I drive the speed I'm going right now, it'll take me half a day to get up there, which is kind of ridiculous. But we got a beautiful day today. It's just a little on the cool side. We had a cold front blow through the last couple of days with rain, which we really needed, so I'm glad we got it. We got a pretty good bit of rain. And my yard is thankful for it, I'm sure. I put down a bunch of clover seed out on the east end of the house. We drive our trucks around the east side of the house to load and unload stuff, because that's the closest door, that we can get to, like bringing groceries in or whatever. So we kind of have worn a path through there, which isn't so bad, but we kind of killed off the grass doing it. So I threw the clover seed out about a month ago, maybe a month and a half even, back when it was still cold, but we were getting a little bit of rain and a little snow. And it's starting to come in now. So I've been staying off of that. Bill's been putting his truck over on that side once in a while, but we've been trying not to drive over it too much to give it a chance to grow back in. I noticed it's starting to come in. Little baby clovers are springing up. But look at the leaves on the trees here. As cold as it was last night, everything's still coming out and blooming. Leafing out, the grass is green. All that rain we got was really, really good timing. I've got a lilac bush in the yard that's blooming. It's just getting ready, well, it's starting to bloom. So, it's spring. It may not technically be spring by the calendar, but it is being spring-like here anyway. And I'm glad. I have been through so many cold, snow up to my ass winters up in Colorado that, I really appreciate not having to deal with that stuff here. That's one of the things I like best about this region, is the more temperate weather. I mean, don't get me wrong, we still can have cold as hell winters here, but we generally don't have long periods of time when it's that cold. Even in our worst winters, it might stay cold for a couple of weeks, but usually not any longer than that. And then it'll warm back up in between, so, it's not quite as miserable. That little old man, he's driving about 5 miles an hour. I see him every once in a while out here driving. He must be close to 100 years old. I mean, seriously, he's like a little shriveled up old guy. He still gets around. He used to drive a van. Now he's driving a pickup. He's doing all right. He's keeping it on the road. Kinda. So there's an interesting place down here on the left side of the road. Bill and I are always taking bets on how much closer he's going to put his stuff out in the road. This guy must be like a serious hoarder. I'm sure you can tell. Just look on the left here. I mean, that trailer is just almost in the pavement, and where he's got stuff stacked up between his fence and the road is technically the right-of-way for the road. So we're taking bets on when he's going to block the road, you know, or block at least part of it, actually get out there on the asphalt, because he's running out of room. Guy's got all kinds of stuff back in there. It's kind of crazy. I guess we'll just go up 81. Why not? It's a pretty day. Sun's shining. Traffic's moving. I got 2 full tanks of fuel. I filled up the other day down in Duncan. Something you may notice about this truck, this isn't like the old Dodge that I had, not the old Dodge, but the Dodge that I had. I could romp on it and it would just take off. This truck is not like that at all. It takes a minute to get up to speed, which is fine, because if I want something fast, I'll drive the new Ford. You know, I don't have to run 80 miles an hour doing this stuff. I'm not on those kind of roads where I've got to run that hot. I can piddle along up here at 60 and people can just keep on going around me, you know. And this truck will run 70. It's not a problem. It just takes it a while to get there. It's not 0 to 60 in a quarter of a mile, put it that way. not even remotely. But my thinking on it, I may be full of crap, but my thinking on it is that it's probably geared more for hauling and less toward highway speed. Now, I mean, that would make sense. It's a heavy 1-ton truck. You know, there's no way it's gonna compete with a, you know, with a modern diesel truck for speed. It's just not. Which, I mean, it's just an observation. I don't care. I don't need all that much speed. Just driving it. Well, even when I was hauling trailers with it, I didn't really need that much speed, even though I was on a lot of highways that were, you know, 70, 75 mile an hour roads. But because people can always go around you. But I do try to run close to the speed limit when especially in heavy traffic, because I don't want to be a hazard. But when it's wide open like this and there's not all that much traffic, I don't think it really matters. You know, it's like, why would it? So what I might do today, since I haven't done it for a while, I might run through the Rush Springs Cemetery on the way back. I think I will, because I haven't been up there in a while. I need to go take a look and see if I need to be replacing some flowers. Well, actually, I know I do need to. I'm going to turn some heat on. It's cold enough. Cold enough in this truck. Hands are icy. So I'm just going to stop in by there on the way back. This area, it's kind of weird, because when I was a kid, I didn't know any of this stuff. I didn't care, really. You know, I was a kid. But when I was about 12 years old, I came over here to Rush Springs with my grandpa, who was visiting from Colorado. He was actually born here. Born and raised here. And I didn't really understand any of that at the time, but he took me over here and showed me the cemetery where his mother was buried. And he had a stone put on her grave, or he thought he had it put on her grave. But they didn't really know where she was buried in this plot. But he brought me over and showed me, and he said that he had helped his dad put the little concrete curb around the family plot when he was a kid. His mother died when he was 9 years old. It was in 1919. And he said she died from a gallbladder attack, I guess. But it was also during the great flu epidemic that they were having at that time, 1918, 1919, 1920, right in that area. They had a terrible influenza epidemic, and it was killing a lot of people. His great-grandfather, his dad's dad, died not too long after his mother, and he's also buried up here. So the whole family that was here before my grandpa's generation, they're all buried in this plot. And we never really knew much about it. In fact, I'll just go through there on the way up. Since I'm talking about it now, I'm not going to make you wait till I come back. I mean, that would be kind of dumb, right? But I never knew that my mom's family had that kind of ties to this country. I knew my dad was from this area. He was raised over close to Sterling. Well, not so close to Sterling. Between Marlow and Sterling, they had a farm. And I knew that because we lived out there, and my grandma lived out there and all that. When we moved down here, when I was a kid for a few years, and then we moved back to Colorado. But I was aware that he was raised down here, but my mom wasn't raised here, but her dad was, and her mom was from this area too. She was basically from Sterling. She wasn't born there, but that's where she was raised. So, and I never knew any of that. So I've actually got several generations of people buried here in Rush Springs on my mom's side, plus over in Sterling on my mom's side, and my dad's side too, because his parents and his brother are buried over at Sterling. Dad and mom's stones are here, and we did kind of a weird deal with their burial. My dad decided he wanted to be cremated, and he had prepaid for it. He knew he was dying. He didn't die as soon as he thought he was going to, though. He thought he was dying like 5 years before he actually did die. But they moved back down here to Oklahoma, and the change in elevation from up there, and then he had gone and gotten a different doctor who took him off a bunch of medicines that were actually making him sicker. He took him off those, and he lived another 5 or 6 years after they got down here, and he did really well. He got back out and was doing stuff that he thought was fun. He got to go wild hog hunting, and he spent a lot of time. He was old man at this time. He was in his 80s, but he was pretty feeble, but he couldn't really hunt anymore like he used to. So he was doing for fun was trapping gophers at the cemetery in Marlow. He started out in his own front yard because they were gopher holes, and so he started trapping the gophers. When he ran out of gophers to trap, he caught them all. So then he went and talked to the cemetery. He said, "Hey, y'all mind if I set my gopher traps down here and get rid of some of these, because the cemetery is just full of them." They were like, "Knock yourself out, man." So that was his fun. He felt like he was doing something useful. That was the biggest thing he said about being old like he was. He said, it sucks getting this old. He said, I don't feel like I'm old. Inside, I feel like I'm still me. But on the outside, I can't do anything that I used to do, and I feel like I'm just damn well useless. And he had that attitude. He wasn't real happy about it. But, so he found a way to feel useful, you know. He did what he could do. So, it's kind of an interesting deal being around him in his last days, because I hadn't always got along with him great. When I was a teenager, I was a shit, you know. I was a fucking mess, and I gave him a lot of gray hairs. You know? So there was always kind of a tension between us for years, you know. Most of my adult life after that, because even though, you know, my stupid stage didn't last super long, it lasted long enough that it wore him out, and he was just over it. So it was kind of neat to get to spend the last few years with him, you know, really getting to know him more, because I didn't really know him that well. You know, I mean, I knew him as well as anybody probably knows their dad, you know, when you grow up with them and all. But he never really talked to us about anything really super, you know, personal or anything, because we were kids. You know, you don't tell your kids a bunch of personal stuff usually. But as he got old, he got to be a lot more talkative, you know. And he told me he told me stuff that curled my hair, you know, about how he was raised and stuff. So it was really good to have that time to really kind of get to know him for who he really was, instead of just being like, you know, oh my God, it's my dad, I'm in trouble. Because that's kind of how it was when I was a kid. I was always in trouble. Well, not always. Once I hit about, I don't know, 15 or 16, from then on I was in trouble until I, you know, grew the hell up. Okay, so they're all in here. I'm just going to kind of try to position the truck. I don't know if I can do it here, and maybe get a view of it. I can't get off the road really, because, you know, I don't want to drive on a grave. But this is our family plot here. Did you see the tall stone? I'm just going to back up a little bit here. I'm glad this is a short wheelbase. I can get by with this in here. So the stones over to the right, the two light colored ones that look like military stones, that's my mom and dad's stones. And on the right side of that, there's a darker stone. That's my mother's second or third great grandmother. She was from Alabama, and she lived through the Civil War. She lost one husband to the Civil War, and she remarried and had another family, and then she came here with all of them, all of her kids. And they all lived out the rest of their lives here, or most of them did. And over here on the far left, you can just see the flag sticking up on the left, just to the right of the tree trunk. That's my great-grandma's grave. So there's a concrete curb around that whole plot, that whole family plot, that my grandpa and his dad built in there. I'm just going to go in here and turn around and come back out this same gate. So when Grandpa bought the stone for his mother's grave, he had it set in here. He ordered it and had it set. He was living in Colorado. He moved to Colorado way back when and lived out the rest of his life up there. And my mom was raised in Denver back when it was a nice city. And so he had the stone set, but he didn't know exactly where in the plot his mother was buried, because he couldn't find the etching on the curb itself of her name that my great-grandpa etched into that. And I'll go back up here and stop and take the camera out and show you what I'm talking about. I might as well do this, because genealogy is one of the things I've done since I was 18 years old. I've always been curious about where I came from, where do I fit in, where do I belong. So I never felt like I fit in or belonged anywhere, to be honest. But Bill and I came up here, oh, it's probably 12, 13 years ago now, and we decided to clean up the family plot, and we were debating putting stones on it, but we had to figure out who all was buried in there because a couple of the stones weren't there. Well, most of the stones weren't there. I'll show you what we did. But once we cleaned off the concrete curb around it, we actually found where my great-grandpa etched my great-grandmother's name in the edge of the curb. So I'm going to go ahead and pull my camera out. Oh, there's a grape hyacinth growing here. It's one of my favorite little spring flowers. Get a picture of this for you. I can't see the screen very well out here in the sun. That's a big drawback to these view screens. But here's that's a grape hyacinth. It's blooming. So, this is the family plot. And when we came in here to clean this up, all those years ago, the curb was completely covered with Bermuda grass. And this little stone was over there in the middle of the plot. But with what Grandpa had told me when I was a kid, we were able to find Lizzie Viola Burt etched in the concrete curb. So we know that's where she was buried. So I talked to my mom and we decided to move the stone over. So we did. So now her stone is on her actual grave. She's got a baby buried in here next to her, I think. So my mom and I mean, it took me several years to figure out who all was in here. But once we did, there were no stones on anybody. They were really poor. The Civil War destroyed all their, they didn't have anything. They lost everything. So they didn't have money to put stones on for the most part. So my mom and I bought this stone and had it etched with all of their names, everybody that we knew, we proved was buried in here. And my mom decided she wanted her stone here and Dad's. So, and she wanted her stone to match Dad's, which, I don't know, I should have done a little different, I think, in retrospect, but you do what you do. But, and then her third great grandmother, my fourth great grandmother, Sarah Kaufman, her name was Sarah Calfee, her birth name. She was the daughter of Evan Adair Calfee, who was a statesman for Coosa County, Alabama, before the Civil War. So she came from a pretty good-sized family. But she married John William Burt in Coosa County, and he went off to war. And he was captured, I think, at Chickamauga, one of those big battles in Tennessee, I think, and they took him to Camp Chase, Ohio, and held him as a prisoner of war. And that's where he died 5 days before the war ended. He ended up getting typhoid fever because the conditions were so bad. And so that's where he's buried, up in Ohio. I'm sure that was probably terrible for everybody involved. But he left 3 children and his wife. her a widow, the kids orphans. And to add insult to injury, they didn't even bury him under his correct name at Camp Chase. They had an error in their records, and they listed his name as Burke, B-U-R-K, instead of Bert. Okay, I'm having a little technical difficulty here. Hang on. I gotta do this sight unseen, just by feel. This is interesting. I should have plugged it in before I got it all reset up there. Oh, come on. This ain't rocket science. There we go. Got it plugged in. So anyway, he died in Camp Chase. He's buried under the name John Burke, B-U-R-K. I tried to get them to correct that, and I never got any response back from the people who take care of that cemetery. It's one of those things, you know, the price of war. Civil War is a terrible thing. A terrible, terrible thing. It wiped out an entire generation of men. And the South never really recovered from it. And now, you know, I don't know. Now we're making noises like we want to have another civil war, which I think is, I understand why people are fed up. People are sick of the political polarization in this country. But that's a bad, bad, bad idea. We do not want to have another civil war. I mean, just hell no. Not only no, but hell no. No, thank you. Okay, so much for the cemetery trip. I was going to tell you though, we did a weird deal with Mom and Dad because my dad had prepaid for cremation. So when he passed away, I went down to the funeral home and gave him his paperwork and said, can you honor this? Because it came out of he had done it in Colorado, prepaid it up there at a different mortuary. And they said, yeah, we'll honor it. I'm like, okay, good. So they did. And Dad had told me, and he told my sister that he wanted to be, he wanted his ashes scattered out somewhere out west of Craig, Colorado. He spent a lot of time out there hunting and doing horsing type of things. He was an outdoorsman. He was a cowboy, an equestrian. You know, he's a horseman. And so he told me a little different, or I took it different anyway. Maybe he told us the same thing, but we just interpreted it our own ways. But he had told me on several occasions, just put my ashes out there somewhere. I don't care. Just put them out there. So it's like, okay. So what we decided to do after Mom passed away was we kind of compromised. But the reason we did it was because Mom didn't really want to be buried or cremated, you know. And she would bring up the topic, and I'd say, well, what do you want to do, Mom? You know, she'd go, well, you know, you're going to have to do something with me when I die. I'm like, well, what do you want me to do? And she said, well, I don't like the idea of being buried, but I don't really like the idea of being cremated either. So she says, I guess I'm just going to make you decide. I'm like, oh, gee, thanks, Ma. Okay, whatever. You know. I did not talk to my mother like that. But, you know, that's what I was thinking. I was like, okay, I guess when the time comes, I'll deal with it. And she said, okay. So after Dad died, before Mom died, there was a period of about 3 years in there. And in the meantime, Mom decided she did not want to scatter Dad's ashes because she kind of liked having him in the house with her, his ashes. She said it was kind of comforting to her for him to be there, so she kept him in her china cabinet. She cleaned off the bottom shelf in her old-fashioned round front glass china cabinet that had been her mother's, and she put him on the bottom shelf of that and kept him down there. And I just thought that was so funny because Dad would have thought that was hilarious himself. He would have laughed his ass off. You know, to think he wanted to be out there somewhere and she stuck him in the bottom of the china cabinet. So that's where Dad stayed until Mom passed away. And then we had to decide what to do with Mom. And I basically made an executive decision to just have her cremated like Dad was. Because I figured if she was good with that, once it was done, you know, she was okay with it. And because it comforted her to know, you know, that he was still kind of around. I thought, well, by that time, she would probably say, okay, that would be okay too for her. So that's what I did. I had her cremated. But what we also did was I took Dad's ashes to the mortuary when we went in to make the arrangements for Mom. My sister and I went, and I asked him, I said, can you do something really weird for me? And he's like, we can do whatever you want. I'm like, okay, this is what we kind of want. And my sister was, my younger sister was right there with me. Mom was living at my sister's house in Craig when she passed away. But, so we were in there and we're sitting there talking to the guy, and so I set Dad's ashes up on this desk. I said, can you do this? Can you put some of Dad's ashes and some of Mom's ashes in a little mini urn for my youngest brother? He's very sentimental. I knew it would mean the world to him. So we asked him to do that, and they said, yeah, we can do that, no problem. And I said, or no, I think we actually had done that with Dad's ashes, so we did that with Mom's too, put Mom's in a new little urn for him. And then I said, for the rest of it, can you split them into 2 equal packages, mix them together in 2 equal packages so that half of them's in one and half of them's in the other together. And he said, yeah, we can do that, no problem. So that's what they ended up doing. So my youngest brother got his little, you know, heart urn, I think it was, for Mom. And then there was a little camo urn for Dad that we had done when Dad died for him. And then, so I had these 2 bundles of mixed ashes of Mom and Dad. So what we did was we compromised, because I didn't want to just have their stones down here in Rush Springs with no remains there, because it felt kind of phony to me, you know, like it was kind of cheating a little bit, which I guess is just something in my head, you know. It didn't mean it, but that's kind of how I felt about it. And my siblings all agreed. They were like, yeah, let's do that. So we took that half the day we did Mom's actual memorial service down here at her church. That afternoon we went out and we interred her ashes and Dad's ashes in the cemetery by their stones. So they're actually, part of them is actually there. So that is legitimately their official resting place. And then a few months later, we went out to Colorado, and my younger sister, my brother, and I, and her husband, and I can't remember if anybody else went. I don't really remember. My nephew might have gone. But anyway, we went out and my brother scattered their ashes, the remains of their ashes, the remainder, out at a place called Sheep's Head Basin, which is out in Sandwash, or out toward Sandwash, out in western Colorado. It's really wild, beautiful country out there. and there's a hill there. We know exactly where it is, you know. It's like, so that's where we ended up scattering their ashes, the rest of them. So all of that worked out really well. It seemed like a great way to do it, a great compromise. Everybody was happy with it, you know. And so then this past year, my younger sister in Craig, which was the town my mom and dad lived in Craig for like 40 years before they moved back down here for the last few years of their time, and then Mom moved back to Craig before she passed away. So a lot of people in Craig knew them. You know, they had churches, and, you know, Dad had roping buddies and just friends, you know, in the horse side of things up there, and then Mom, you know, at the church. So my sister decided that she needed to buy a burial plot, you know, because she got thinking about her mortality and her husband's mortality. You know, you get to this age and you start thinking, I better plan something, you know, because it's coming, who knows when, but it is coming. You know, it's the way the world is, it's the way life works. So she went and bought a couple of burial plots, and then she got to thinking about it. She wanted to put a stone there in the Craig Cemetery next to where she'll be buried eventually, and her husband, so that there would be a monument there, you know, locally where they had lived for so long. So she actually did a really cool job of it. She was having trouble finding a stone that wasn't outrageously expensive. I don't know if you shot for headstones, but they're astronomically expensive. And everything's even higher in Colorado now because, well, it just is. So she looked and looked and looked online, looked around, looked everywhere, went to all the monument places, couldn't find anything reasonable. And then she, like, I don't know, she told me about, she either had a dream or she just woke up with the idea, I can't remember which, but she had the idea anyway one morning to go to Marble, Colorado and go look. She could have two kinds of stones in the cemetery. It could either be granite or marble. You know, those are the two stone types that they allowed. She had actually gone and found a raw stone up in the mountains, which they took down, and then they were going to use that, but then the cemetery said, no, it has to be marble or granite. So she's like, okay. So she went up to Marble, Colorado, and they were looking around, and she didn't really like the big marble slabs that she was seeing, but she came across this big granite stone that's kind of polished on the top and had the rough cut edges and stuff, and it was like perfect. So she talked to the lady, and the lady said, yeah, she said, that's the leftover half of a stone, I think is what she said, that her husband had brought in and finished for something, but it was just half of it. It was reasonable. The price on it was right about what she wanted to spend. So I was teasing her. I said, yeah, I said, Mom probably came to you in a dream and told you to go do that. And she was laughing. So I don't know. I can't remember if she had a dream or just woke up with the idea or whatever. But she was able to get this granite stone that was nicely done, looks really pretty, and they had a brass plaque made up to attach to the stone with Mom and Dad's information on it. And it said, you know, it's like a memorial stone, but then it says their remains are interred in Rush Springs, Oklahoma, which is their actual, you know. So it's just kind of a cool deal. But it was like this deal, you know, you get to a certain age and you have to face these kind of things because your parents are going to die off, and for other people in your life, you know, you have to kind of learn that you've got to take care of this stuff, but you don't want to put yourself in the poorhouse doing it, you know. I mean, my mom and dad wouldn't have wanted that. They would have thought it was stupid, you know, to break the bank doing something like that. So But this is, it was just a cool idea. So I'm glad she did that. And it turns out that made me feel better about the stone that I got from Mom, because I did what Mom asked me to do. She said, I want a stone to match your dad's. And the only thing I would have done different on it anyway is I probably would have put a flower or something instead of the cross. But she was a Christian, and that was her main identity as a Christian. She was a Christian woman. That was really important to her, so that's why I chose that. But it just looks too military. But that's what she wanted, so the one that my sister did, that Cindy did, it has roses or something on it. It's more floral and kind of softer and prettier. So I'm really glad she did that. So it makes me not feel quite as bad about doing this one the way I did, because it's kind of stark and, kind of severe. So I'm really glad she did that anyway. So that's the whole thing. But I don't know how many of y'all have ever done any kind of genealogical research, but man, you can get caught up in that, and you can spend your whole life doing it and still not know all the answers. It's not that easy. It's a lot easier than it used to be, because now you can go on the internet and pretty much find every document that you need in the United States. Other countries, not so much. But in the United States, you can find documents going way back to when they started keeping the documents anyway, for most places. But I can remember when I first started, I would send out a letter to a courthouse in some other place where I thought the family had lived, asking for a copy of some record, and enclosing $1 or $2 for, to pay for the copies. And I'd have to wait however many weeks until they got around to answering my letter, and either sent back my money and said, well, we don't have any records, or they'd send copies of the records, So it was very much a slow process, much slower paced type of thing, and it was that way until the 90s, till about the mid-90s really. And then it started getting to the point where you could actually find records online. I actually had a company back in like 96, I think. 96 to just about 2000. I actually bought rolls of microfilm with records on them, and I scanned them to CDs, and my company was called Digiarco, Digital Archives of Colorado. And so I actually was one of the first companies to actually put microfiche copies onto a CD, so you could go through the disc and look at your copy for like a given area. I did it by areas. I think I started like with Baltimore records or something. It was whatever was available on microfilm. So I had this fancy machine I bought that you put your microfilm on it, and then you could scroll through and take a picture of each frame of each record, and then you could save that to a CD or to a file, and then you could put all that on a CD, and that's what I did for a while. So I did like, I don't know, I think 15 or 20 different CD titles. And then finally, the technology got to the point where that even became obsolete pretty quickly. And then they just started putting it online, like Ancestry.com. It was actually Family Tree. I think it was called Family Tree before they turned it into Ancestry and started putting the actual records up online. So, but yeah, that was one of my companies. So it was fun. But I still don't have all the answers. I mean, you can only go back so far, because written records only go back so far, and that's not very far in the United States. We're a pretty young country. And then when you try and get records out of like Ireland, which is where I need to get some records out of, it's pretty hard to get them. You have to pay somebody to go actually get them, I think, still, because they haven't been digitized. Like everything in the United States pretty much is digitized now, thanks to the Mormon Church, because they went in they were, like in the early 90s, they were going in and microfilming all of the county documents around here. So, but that's one of those hobbies that if you like digging for information, if you're looking for truth and facts, that's a real engrossing hobby. It'll make a really good investigator out of you. So, actually, it might have indirectly led to me being a good cop when I was a cop, because I had kind of learned a lot of investigative techniques just from that, from years and years of doing that, hunting for documents, doing this, doing that, looking for facts, reliable, provable facts. So, you never know. Life can take you in many interesting directions if you let it.